Yo, what's up, guys? I kind of just want to make another video. Honestly, I just enjoy making random dark and darker content videos. I think it's fun. It's fun to talk about, even if I don't feel like playing. But anyways, I want to make a video on a question that is very, very, very highly asked and very highly debated on what the correct answer is. And that is Falchion versus Arming Sword. Which one is better? Which one do I use? Which one should you use? And kind of just, that general concept of which sword is better. Now, both weapons have upsides, and obviously both weapons have downsides, as anything does. There's nothing that's the best weapon of all time, or more. But disregarding that, like I said, both weapons are, I think both weapons are very good. So let me start that off with. I don't particularly think one is significantly better than the other. I think they do different things better. Like, I don't think either of them has, I think they are good in their own right, but neither of them has like crossovers on why they're both good. For example, Falchion has a very, very high base damage. Arming Sword has okay base damage. It's not super high, pretty low, honestly, on the pretty low compared to most weapons that are like, swords and stuff. I mean, it's like the same. It's like slightly less or slightly more damage than a rapier, and it's like way slower. Whereas, Falchion has horizontal movesets, which are really good for cleaving, really good open areas, really bad in doorways. Arming Sword has, kind of like vertical diagonals, which is really, really bad in certain situations. For example, if someone's trying to block you, if someone's holding up a shield, an Arming Sword is has a very, very hard time getting around that shield. Falchion's really easy. You can jump hit them, you can hit them in the feet. Super, super easy to do with Falchion. But anyways, before I get too ahead of myself, start off with, like I said, I think both of them are viable. And to begin with, I will talk about the Arming Sword, and I'll talk about the Falchion. So my personal preference, I prefer the Arming Sword, right? I think the Arming Sword is way better in terms of how it feels. In actuality, I think the Arming Sword requires very, very high levels of gear to perform on the level that the Falchion does. And you can make the argument that when you have that gear that makes the Arming Sword perform like a Falchion, it's like, so if an Arming Sword performs that much better, then at that point, wouldn't the Falchion perform even better than it already is? And I mean, yeah, that is a fair argument you could make. However, I'll give you guys an example. Let's say my Arming Sword hits for 100 damage, right? And I have done that. I've had an Arming Sword that hits for 100 damage. That's without Slayer, just like on a build, just like the one I'm showing you right here. Let's say an Arming Sword hits for 100 damage. So in 2 hits, like in a headshot, like 2 headshots, I'm going to do about 200 damage. And generally speaking, I'm going to kill most characters in the game. Wizards, low strength rangers, rogues, like all of those characters, hell, even clerics to an extent. All of those characters are probably going to die in 2 hits. That's just kind of a given for 200 damage. If I have a Falchion that does, like, let's say 120, 130, in that same amount of damage, I'm probably still gonna 2-shot most people if I headshot them, right? That's the thing is, in this game, like, you could look at weapons side by side and compare their DPS, damage per second. However, in this game, that doesn't really matter. What matters more is hits to kill, and that literally just means how many times you have to hit someone to kill them. If the Falchion and the Arming Sword kill people in the exact same amount of hits, then isn't the Arming Sword, which swings much faster, better? That's kind of just a given. The hard part is, though, like I mentioned before, is getting your Arming Sword to that level where it's killing people in the same amount of hits as the Falchion is. Because, like I said, like, for example, let's take these 2 blue weapons. This has 32, this has 40. That is an 8 weapon damage difference. If you don't know how weapon damage works, roughly 1 weapon damage will give you about 2 2 more actual damage. So like 1 weapon damage is like 2 additional damage, right? That's kind of how it works. So this Falchion is going to hit for about 16 more damage than this Arming Sword. And then, you get higher rarities, and it's like, purple Arming Sword can be 35, purple Falchion can be 45, right? So that's 10. So that'll be 20 damage difference. So like I said before, getting that Arming Sword to the level of a Falchion is really difficult, and you require a lot of gear. Like, at this point, like, with this gear I have on here, my Arming Sword would not hit for 100. This Falchion of Honor here, which is max damage with +2 weapon damage roll, this is only hitting for like 106 on the first swing. If you look at an Arming Sword, this is going to hit for much, much less. I'll probably hit for like 80 with this thing. So if you look at that, then yeah, the Falchion of Honor is way better. Like, this Falchion would be way better. I'm definitely killing people in less hits in this Falchion than I would with this Arming Sword. So, but like I said, if you can get your Arming Sword to that point, which, like I said, is difficult, however, doable, very, very doable, then the arming sword is generally going to be better. Because once again, it swings much faster. And if you were killing people in 2 hits with the arming sword versus 2 hits with the falchion, that is like that's a very big difference in the amount of time it takes to kill. Like the time to kill will be much lower with the arming sword. And then, not to mention, because you were swinging faster, even in those matchups versus like barbarians or fighters, where it takes you more than 2 to 3 hits to kill them, the arming sword will outclass the falchion in terms of DPS. Because, like I did say that DPS isn't relevant. However, going back on exactly my words, it's only not relevant when you're killing in few hits. If it takes you 6, 7 hits to kill someone, then DPS becomes a factor. Because if, like, let's say if I have to do 500 damage, because we're considering like a lot of HP with PDR, right? Let's say I have to do 500 damage. Which one of these weapons is going to reach it faster? It'll be the falchion or it'll be the arming sword. Yeah, the falchion is hitting harder. However, it's also hitting way slower. So in that argument, the falchion is, the falchion's going to get outclassed in DPS by the arming sword that's swinging much faster. I think it's about after 3 hits, the arming sword will outclass the falchion in terms of DPS. So for the falchion to be better, it has to be killing at under 3 hits, as opposed to the arming sword. The arming sword has to be taking at least 3 hits to kill, while the falchion has to be taking 2. Okay, excuse me. I had a little sip of my water. But anyways, so that is kind of the logistics behind it. If you didn't follow along, honestly, I don't blame you. That shit's tedious and annoying to remember. But just TLDR, your arming sword needs to be killing in the same amount of hits as your falchion for it to be better. Or at most, 1 more. If your arming sword is taking 4 hits to kill while your falchion's taking 2, arming sword's worse, throw it out. Okay, now on to something that's more important, I think, than damage for the most part, is movesets. The arming sword has I've put out like a weapon moveset guide. If you don't see me go over that, go for it. I don't really care to do it. I'm lazy. However, the arming sword has, it has diagonals and it has a thrust. The arming sword thrust is one of the worst attacks in the game. That is just period. It's not that long range as opposed to the normal slashes. It is a very tight hitbox window. So this is actually a weird mechanic that's kind of like a little tidbit. Doesn't matter. So for the arming sword, for the thrust, it'll have active hitbox, or it'll have an active hitbox, which means the weapon, the entire duration the weapon's out, it can hit, it can like do damage. It'll have an active hitbox against PvE, but not against PvP. I don't understand it, but that's just how it works. I've tested it. I don't know if they ever changed it. Just weird, and it works that way. So what that means is, if you do the thrust, you can drag the weapon into a mob, and it'll hit the mob. However, you cannot drag it into a player. If you drag it into a player, it will not damage them. Like I said, that's really weird. I don't understand it, but just how it works. But anyways, back on to like the main topic. So, you have, like I said, you have your diagonals and your thrust. Thrust is really bad. However, the diagonals are very good. The only time they are bad is if someone's trying to block you. And the reason being is it's really hard to get around somebody's shield with an arming sword. If they're not blocking properly, you can either jump and tap them in the head, or you can hit them in the legs. But against someone who's smart, knows how to use a shield, it's going to be really hard to damage it with an arming sword. Really hard. And like I said, the falchion's much better at that, but I will move on to that after. But onto the benefits of the arming sword's moveset, because obviously it does have them. One thing that's really big is because the arming sword swings faster, it has a faster recover. What that means is if I swing my arming sword, I can then block much faster because of how much faster my arming sword swung than the falchion. So I don't know the exact timing on it. But let's say the arming sword swings, like it takes 0.75 seconds to swing, versus the falchion's like 1.25. I don't think those are the actual numbers. This is just hypothetical, like just to give you an idea of what I mean. By that logic, I can block a full half second faster with the arming sword swing than with the falchion. And once again, like I don't actually know how accurate those numbers are. I mean, they're definitely not perfectly accurate, but they're probably not too far off either. But and that block timing can make a world of difference, like entire difference. That means I have an extra half second to swing, hit someone, and then get my block up to stop them. And then if you add things onto that, like shield mastery benefit, where if they hit your shield, you get to swing really fast. For most weapons, if you get a shield mastery proc, you can hit the person with an arming sword and get your shield back up before they can hit you, and it's really not that close. But anyways, that is another one of the benefits. But then the best thing about the arming sword, the number one thing that brings me back to this weapon, is 90% of the time when you swing this weapon, you are going to either hit a headshot or you're going to hit a body shot. hitting arms or legs or really anything else with this weapon is very hard to do because of the moveset. As long as you are aiming center mass, like towards their chest, most of the time you're going to hit headshots without even trying, just because that's the weapon's moveset and that's how it works. And that is the best part. Hitting headshots consistently is the best way to increase your damage. And if you look at it like, yes, the Army Sword does have less damage than the Falchion. However, if I'm consistently hitting headshots or even body shots, whereas the Falchion's going to be hitting arms, which I'll go over in a second, then the Falchion really doesn't have that much more damage than the Army Sword, if any. It's kind of actually a damage drop-off, really. Because for the damage reduction, or the damage, the damage reduction when you're hitting limbs and body, as opposed to hitting headshots. But that is enough about the Arming Sword. On to the Falchion. And the Falchion has something really unique that actually makes it very, very good. And I will go over that in a second. So, the Falchion, once again, we talked about it. The Falchion has very, very high damage. Super, super high damage. Way too high for a one-handed sword. I'm not even going to lie. The Falchion should not have this high of damage. I don't even know why they buffed it back. But anyways, Falchion has super high damage. And also, it does have a larger movement speed penalty. Only by about 5, which is roughly about it's close to 2%. Just say that's all you need. It's kind of really close to 2%. More of a movement speed penalty than the Arming Sword. But like I said, high damage, and you have the moveset. So the Falchion has good and bad things about the moveset. The really good thing about it is because it's a horizontal, it's really easy to move it around blocks. It's really easy to hit people in the legs, hit them in the head if you jump over their shield, that type of thing. It's really hard to block a Falchion consistently. One, just because even if you see the weapon coming at you, from sideways, it's hard to tell exactly where they're aiming. You can try to put your shield into it, but they can very, very easily, crouch or jump or whatever to get around your block. And that is probably the biggest selling point of the Falchion that makes it really useful, other than its incredibly high damage. Other than that, the Falchion kind of works the same as any other horizontal weapon. If you're in a doorway swinging it, you can hit the door really easily. Sometimes you can get stuck in there. People can hold you in a doorway so you can't swing, and that type of thing. Then the biggest downside to it is on the other. It's moveset also. That's the biggest upside and downside is its fucking moveset. I've died so many times with the Falchion because you'll swing at somebody and you'll hit their arm 4 times in a row. And the thing is, it's like, sure, you could say just aim for the head, but then because you're swinging a horizontal, it's very easy for them to duck it or whatever. Or duck it, jump, and make you hit their arm, anything like that. But the Falchion is really bad at hitting body shots, and body shots are like neutral damage. It's like your base damage, right? Headshots like a damage multiplier. Limb shots are like a damage reduction. But so it's really hard to hit body shots with the Falchion because of the horizontal moveset. You're almost always going to swing into their arm first, and if you swing into their arm and then their body, it only counts the arm hit. It doesn't do a body hit as well. And because of that, I really don't like the Falchion. I've used it, and I am using it a lot just because of how ridiculous the damage is. However, it is really, really annoying when you hit somebody 4 times in the arm. And I have so many clips of it, of me swinging at a barbarian as they're swinging, and they'll pull their arms up, and I'll slap them in the arm 4 times, and I'll hit them 4 or 5 times, and they won't die because I hit them in the arm so many times. It's however, though, if you are able to hit that headshot number, if you're able to hit those headshots, this thing slaps. You will 1 to 2 tap pretty much anyone in the game when you are very geared to the Falchion if you are hitting headshots consistently. That's not including, obviously, fighters. And sometimes you can 1 or 2 shot barbarians if you're really geared. That's just how it works, how high the damage is. However, like I said, doing that consistently isn't super easy, but if you can, then congratulations, you're a lord. Alright, now on to the last thing I think is worth mentioning about the Falchion that makes it very, very good. And this is going to be a weird one. However, it is that you can craft Falchions of Honor from the weapon merchant. This gives you a really easy, reliable source of getting a high rarity weapon that you cannot get for the Arming Sword. For Arming Swords, you just have to hope you roll them. Falchions of Honor, you can literally just buy the materials and you can craft one whenever you want. Gold, super easy to get. Broken Swords, easy to get. Token of Honor, not super easy to get. However, they get sold, not infrequently and for a couple hundred gold. So for the price of around 1,000 gold, you can craft basically Abyss Legendary Falchion as soon as you roll it. And if you have multiple characters, you have friends, you tell them, hey, look out for this, I'm trying to craft this. They're on the lookout for you. And that just gives you access to, like I said, a literal just legendary weapon with 1 extra roll in the armor pen that you can go for. And like I said, if you get a very good one, that is just a giant upgrade as opposed to the Arming Sword. The Arming Sword It's not easy. Honestly, it's not easy to get good purples. It's even harder to get good legendary arming swords. But Falchions of Honor, super easy to get. Not really like, there's really no downside to it. It even has an upside with the armor pin. It rolls innately. Just kind of insane that you can do this. And that honestly makes a lot of these other weapons really good. It makes the Demon's Glee, that's awesome. Centaur's Madness, that's awesome. Lightbringer, that's awesome. Some of these others don't matter, like Troll's Bane, Void Blade, Spear of Rot. These aren't as relevant. No one really makes most of these. Spear of Rot, a bit better. That doesn't matter. But Troll's Bane and Void Blade, these are both awful. Honestly, one reason these are bad, this is completely irrelevant to the video, but one reason these are bad is because this requires dark matter to make. I don't know if you're not familiar with the resource. That Void Blade, that little black ash looking thing, that is dark matter. Dark matter only drops from Lich, which is the boss in Crypts, and it drops at a very, very low rate. So this is like one of the worst weapons you can make because it's a longsword, and it requires the rarest resource. And then you have like the Trolls Club, which is, a pain to get to. However, way more common than dark matter. But anyways, that kind of sums it up for the video. Like I said, I don't have like a conclusive thing I can tell you that's like, use this or use this. It's really to use it whichever one you want. If you like Falchion, use Falchion. If you like Arming Sword, use Arming Sword. The one tip I will give is that if your gear is not good, I recommend the Falchion. Falchion is much, much better at low gear because of the high base damage kind of boosting its stats, whereas Arming Sword at low gear stats is not as good. You're hitting for way less. You're hitting for like 60, 70 at the most with like bad gear. So, deal with all this information what you will. Use whatever you feel like. I respect it. However, when you get really good gear, honestly, just try them out. See which one you like. See which one you like for yourself. People have preferences. Some people like Falchion. Some people like Arming Sword. Just how it is. But anyways, I'll catch y'all later. Peace.